Let's get right into the conversation about the Nigerian economy, but with specific reference to developments in the CBN. Over the past couple of weeks, the president nominated a new CBN governor and 4 new deputy governors of the Apex Bank in the country. It was a wholesale change, a welcome development, according to most experts who have observed with keen interest some of the developments that has continued to unfold in the Central Bank of Nigeria. Recently, over 48 hours ago, he was screened and confirmed alongside his 4 new deputies by the Nigerian Senate. He made a lot of remarks and statements about the reforms, the changes he's bringing to bear, the transparency, the accountability, the proactiveness with which his team would lead the Central Bank of Nigeria in managing the affairs of our financial sector vis-a-vis the economy itself. He did talk about that 1 trillion naira in terms of GDP and all of the other reforms that would perhaps stimulate a different ball game for the financial sector, which will also see some sort of improvement in the Nigerian economy. Well, that is all the promises that he's made, and is coming with some degree of credibility in terms of his track record, because he is apparently a known quantity in that area. So we're going to unpack some of the development vis-a-vis the challenges that are currently existing within the CBN itself, issues around corruption, the forex crisis, the Nigerian economy, how hard the hurdles will be for him to overcome, and of course what lies ahead for him as well as Nigerians in the months and years to come. And what are some of the deliverables, the KPIs that we should be looking forward to as far as the deliverables are concerned? Join us on the program. 2 guests we do have with us in the studio: an economist, Aliu Ilyas, and also joining us via Zoom to add to the contribution is Nwachukwu. And Nwachukwu is joining us via Zoom. He's a financial analyst and a team lead researcher at Standard Asset Management Limited. Gentlemen, good morning to both of you, and thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Right. Okay. Let's start with the screening exercise, because there was this glowing remarks coming from Nigerian senators here and there about his track record, about where he's coming from, his antecedents, not just in the private sector, but also in the public sector. But also, we've heard some dissenting views about Mr. Cardoso himself, alongside some of those deputy governors that were nominated and now have been screened. Starting with you, Mr. Aliu, give me your take on what you make of the screening, their views on the reforms they're bringing to the table, and basically how they're trying to, oil this machine to function better for Nigeria.
All right, thank you so much. Basically, it's expected that once you get nominated and you want to present yourself before National Assembly and Nigeria as a whole, you have to prepare very well and you have to speak to the challenges. But I want to agree that they actually spoke to the challenging that Nigerians are facing. But the question is that how do we operationalize what they say? Because Nigeria is always good in the blueprint to say, but operationalization to bring the expected result is just the challenge. So looking at what they are presented, yes, very good one. They must know that the challenges in CBN is very enormous, but it is quite surmountable with the right policy, right decision, and right support from the president. I think with that, they are good to start.
And do you think, looking at their track record, they can walk the talk?
Well, if you look at the track record, especially Olayemi Cardoso, you discover that he has cut across a lot of things. You know, he has cut across private sector, public sector, banking, and whatever. So I think he should bring that to bear. Perhaps he has also worked in a political terrain where he was a commissioner for planning and economic. So with that, we expect him to be able to balance. You know, the challenge he is going to face now, you need to satisfy the majority of Nigeria at the expense of powerful minority who have a lot of things, to really benefit.
You need to step on toes.
Exactly, you need to step on toes. These are the major things he's going to face, and he has to do more to really tame such thing, because this area he is now, people are benefiting from it, while some majority are worse off. So to bring people that are worse off to benefit, that means minority powerful people that are benefiting must be cut to size.
All right, we would listen to some of this perspective. We have a short video we would like you to watch and hear what other people are saying about it.
Thank you for this privilege to meet those who manage our central bank. I want to differ very radically from what seems to be the general view. My view is I am suspicious of people whose main background come from commercial banking. Because central banking is about policy. It's not about marketing. It's not about seeking profit. It's about getting monetary policies right with clear focus on specific microeconomic objectives. Whether it is job creation, stabilizing a price regime, exchange rate regime, inflation regime, all of that. When listening to the CVs, people who have managed banks that have gone into liquidation, that cannot be used as positive in their favor. The truth has to be told. I am not suggesting that any one of them is responsible. I'm saying a doctor who parades the number of people who died under his care cannot forward that to me as a CV for me to appoint him as a Surgeon General. I don't need them to take note of that. That what we do in our small places of work, whether they survive or fail, goes to our credit or discredit. So they should take note. However, sir, I think at the heart of our problem, and I need their views on this, is that the immediate past management of the bank emphasized their autonomy. But in the real world of macroeconomic management, every agency's activity rub off on another agency. There can be no autonomy from monetary authority such that they do not interface with the fiscal authority. And even these two, in my view, if they do not relate with the Ministry of Trade and Commerce, because the challenge we deal with now is, at least to everybody here, everybody seems to have submitted completely to the so-called market forces and rely on the invisible hands of Adam Smith to regulate and determine the value of the Naira. It is now clear, after Babangida started this devaluation, that the Naira, the market forces can never stabilize the Naira. The state must intervene. Interest rate cannot be at 20%, 25%, and you are expecting the manufacturing sector to grow that require long-term investment, or investment that require long-term gestation period, borrowing at 20%. Even if you are a drug dealer, you will find that those dealing with drug in some other part of Latin America will be more competitive. So I think that there is need for a complete thinking outside the box. When the West celebrate our free market, no control, and so on, I'm always suspicious. When they claim for us that we are doing the right thing, the state is withdrawing, less regulations, at a time when we can see that even at the time of world trade, nation states are negotiating with other nation states to have specific trade relationship. So I feel we need this new team. We need this new team to completely think outside the box, and I will expect on this occasion, Mr. President, that all the things that many of our colleagues have spoken to, including my dear brother Ojekalu, if we allow Nigerians to import everything without restriction, and you have limited Naira dollars available, the Naira will continue to suffer devaluation. Our best time that you refer to, Mr. President, when you reminded us of a time where 1 Naira was 1.5 US dollars. I was a very proud worker in the Texas factory. In those days, government ordered a policy of backward integration, prohibit manufacturers from importing certain items. Even some textile fabrics were prohibited because the game of competition presupposes equality and a level playing field. You cannot ask a featherweight champion to go and engage a heavyweight champion in the name of competition. Nigeria needs specific tools to protect industries at home and not pretend that a man with one leg can compete in a race with a man with two legs. We need a complete radical shift. We don't need the West to clap for us. We need Nigerians to clap for us. So I want these bankers, and also I've heard you very much. When I was in trading, we trouble each other somehow when you were in Lagos. And even now, we trouble you so that this president succeed. We need to keep interrogating our assumptions and ensure that we are not copying Washington, all this international finance capital. It is their interest. There is no such thing as common interest. So, Mr. President, I thank you for allowing me to talk this much, because if this president is going to deliver on the renewed hope, it must devise new tools away from invisible market to visible hands that can be held responsible and accountable for our collective future. Thank you, sir.
Interesting perspective over there by Comrade Governor Adams Oshiomhole. I'm not
Senator.
sure it's
Senator.
Whichever one you call him, he's been there, he's seen it all, and he has expressed very strong views about what he thinks about their nomination, despite being very close to the president. Mr. Nwachukwu, if you can hear me, good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
All right. I'm sure you've listened to Governor Oshiomhole express some of the concerns that some Nigerians had about these nominations, and to put them succinctly, people have wondered whether we would continue to see the independence of the central bank as espoused in the Central Bank Act. If you look closely at the history of Cardoso and the president, one would have thought a more neutral person would have espoused some confidence. We were also, as Oshiomhole said, he has this problem with commercial bankers getting these jobs, because there is clearly a marked difference between marketing and making profit and running a policy bank, and how we shouldn't be pandering to all of the submissions from the Bretton Woods around the free economy, open up access to the dollar in a way encouraging import. What do you make of some of these concerns that were raised and the response that were offered by Yemi Cardoso?
Yes, of course. I think I will have to align myself to the thoughts of Senator Adams Oshiomhole. Taking it up from there, I have less expectations for the CBN governor and the rest of his team, in the sense that the current economic situation Nigeria is passing through does not require any of the monetary policy decisions to solve. They are totally fiscal policy decisions. So if there would be any solution, it should be more like a synergy, a collaboration with the CBN, the monetary, and the fiscal policy makers. When you heard Adam Oshiomhole talked about the Ministry of Commerce, this has been what I've been canvassing, that what we need now is a strong, efficient, intelligent Minister of Finance and Minister of National Budget and National Planning, coupled with the Minister of Commerce and Industry, and then you oil it with the Minister or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. These are the key agencies or key ministries of government that need to work together. Like I said earlier, the decisions or the expectations of Nigeria or policies that we need now are not monetary based. Yes, we are worried that we are having a trajectory of a hike in interest rate from somewhere around 11.5% to a current position of 18.75%, gone up more than 750 basis points. Is it still going to continue to raise it? And the concern of Adam Oshiomhole and the rest of us who have looked at the interest rate regime is actually affecting businesses. You can see in the last second quarter financial statement of the commercial bank, we have seen close to 1 trillion naira made as impairment, provisions as bad loans. This as a result of hike in interest rates. So the concerns of Oshomole, the likes of Oshomole and likes of Fox X, looking from the fiscal policy makers, we should not be expecting much from CBN, though that we still has a lot to do in repairing the damage done to the naira, or restoring the confidence naira have lost, and help naira breathe again. In fact, naira, as we speak now, needs to breathe again, because naira is more like it's suffocating, selling above 1,000 for $1. So these are the area fight most of these very speculators who are dealing in currency speculating, those who are doing round tripping from the internal side of the CBN, and those who also outside the CBN shores who are involved in speculation. And like Oshomole talked about, you cannot leave naira to the hands of the market forces. Days have gone. Even as we speak, no economy in the world have operated a totally free floated currency or exchange market. It has some level of manage flotation. You will intervene from time to time. You don't just allow the forces of the market or market forces determine your rate. So the concern of Nigerians is more of fiscal policy decisions that we augment whatever CBN will be coming up with.
Doc, just
CBN
before
should be
we
mindful
come back to the
of
studio,
the rising
I would
interest
like
rate.
to get some bit of understanding. If we choose to go with the managed float, do we have the reserve to support a managed float as it is right now, with a backlog of almost $10 billion and still building? Today we have suppliers from abroad rejecting letters of credits from Nigeria because of our reserve situation. If we choose to go that way, do we have the reserves to support a managed float exchange rate policy?
Thank you so much. That is the clause of the matter. Yes, we are having insufficient flow of dollar into the shores of Nigeria. So this is where the real challenge. That's why I said it's not fiscal policy. Whether you manage, whether you float it, you need the sufficient supply of currency, hard currencies, to the Nigerian forex market. So how do you get it? You get it by opening up your crude oil production. You get it by putting up policies around diaspora remittances, so that our sons and our daughters who have millions and thousands of dollars stashed abroad can come and invest. You put it off from the commerce and industry by inviting foreign indirect investment. As it stands now, we are almost losing the little we have, as both in foreign direct investment and portfolio investors. So we need a lot of fiscal policy decisions. So that's where the clause of the matter is. How do we shore up the supply of crude to the shores of Nigeria? How do we make sure that we have sufficient supply so that you can meet up your balance of payments? And how do we also help our local manufacturers by putting up policies around backward integration program, import substitution program, so that we can up off our local production to augment? How do we make sure that we take away the import bills from the petroleum product is taken up by refining 20 to 30, 40 to 50% of our local consumption of petroleum product? These are the measures. They are not they are not monetary policy decisions. They are fiscal policy decisions. These are where the real questions or the real demands or the real expectation are. What are we doing in this area? Like I said, the pressure is coming from because we continue to remain a consuming nation.
That is outside the sphere of influence or control of the CBN. But one thing that many Nigerians can relate to at this point in time, Mr. Alia, is that inflation is at a record high. And he did talk about that during the screening exercise, talking about addressing the root causes of all of these issues. For instance, when he said, if inflation is on food, I mean, there's no if. There is already inflation on food, right? We ramp up production of food. which is something that directly correlates with developments in the agriculture sector. He said if inflation is on energy, we know the challenges in the energy sector. And he said if you're importing automatically, you're importing inflation, which is a very clear description of this problem that we've been faced with for quite some time now. A lot of people say that, listen, he's facing the same demons the MFLS face, right. the Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi face in the CBN, as well as even in part what Professor Charles Oludu faced. I mean, the degrees vary, but give me your understanding on what his team can do to mitigate some of these issues, especially when you understand that the sphere of influence is quite limited to all of these other indices, especially around inflation, for instance.
Right. I think our challenge is very, very, like I said, it's enormous, but it is surmountable with this team. Now, remember, we also have Minister of Finance, who is the coordinating minister of the economy. So definitely they need to work together, because there's a lot of challenges. The challenge of interest rate, challenge of inflation, challenge of naira floating, and also ultimately challenge of the economy indices as a whole. So if you ask me now, a lot of things on his table. Remember, we also have naira. Now he has to start picking this one after the other and be putting them into proper perspective. Now, if you look at, if we are able to maximize our naira as expected, we wouldn't have these challenges. But how do we now make use of this naira? Is by true government policy. For instance, if you say, okay, the civil servant that we have, let's pay them through this platform. By the time you pay this high number, and they also pay out to that platform, what are you, we have started using those platform, and it will, before you know, people will start key into, because the number is very high. Then in terms of inflation, it is no longer a news that we have serious issue of food inflation. Now, what's the problem with food inflation? Everything is not issue of only CBN. There's other sundry issues to address. For instance, the challenge of food inflation is challenge of supply chain. So if you don't have adequate supply chain process, it's a problem. I have a produce in Kebbi, and I want to take that produce from Kebbi to Lagos, and 40-feet container to take it from that place to Lagos is 20 million. So if I take it to Lagos, how much will I sell it? I have to consider amount I've sold, put into it, and sell it out.
Your profit.
That's the problem. And also come about to manufacturing sector. Now, the interest rate is a problem. If I'm a manufacturer, I will also prefer to go and have my money in bank and collect interest on it, in place of using that money to go and invest at this interest rate regime. So these are the things they need to work out about and around very, very well. It's very key.
You know, Mr. Elias, when you speak, you talk about implementation and not the policies. I'm a bit at a loss, because we are in a dire strait in Nigeria,
right.
And the CBN is struggling with growth and price stability. On the one hand, you want to engender growth, expand spending in the economy. I mean, the manufacturers were telling us yesterday that goods worth almost 250 billion was unsold in the first quarter. It speaks to our purchasing power parity. You want to engender growth. You want to see us grow somewhere in the 4-5%. But yet you are stifling
the policy.
You are stifling interest rates.
Right.
Today it is anywhere between 24 and 28%, depending on your negotiating power with the commercial bank. Where do we find the balance between bringing down inflation and spurring growth at the same time? Which of them do you think the central bank should be prioritizing at this time?
You said their first litmus test is the incoming NPC meeting. I'm sure we know. Yeah. So therein, we expect them to make some policy direction that will help. Perhaps, are they going to increase the NPR? That's the first question. Are they going to, for me, they have to leave it at that and look at other indices. Now, for manufacturing sector, I always say that we have two variables that are contending. The variable of floating of naira and the variable of removing fuel subsidy. If you look at them, there is the way they work that you have to you are expected to take one, work around one before you bring the second. But at this point in time now, the two is there. So manufacturing sector are not in serious trouble, because they need a lot need money to operationalize what they have to do. Is not, remember, the backlog of naira redesigned is still there. The purchasing power is poor. So who buys? And the implication is that if people doesn't really buy from manufacturer, what happens? They downsize. When they downsize, what happens? There is job loss. When there is job loss, what happens? The GDP will also fall, because you won't be able to. If you even look at the GDP last one release, it was service sector that contributed most, not even the manufacturing sector, and not even the agricultural sector. That's a serious problem. So a lot of things need to do by allowing, for me, if you am to advise them now, they should find a window for this manufacturing sector to assess this their foreign, forex.
Would that not amount to another subsidy?
What? Okay, now is there no subsidy back to the oil sector again? Now look at it. Now it's still no subsidy. If NNPC goes and gets some money to really cushion the effect of people that want to import, is that not subsidy?
It might not be direct, but I understand. I understand the point you're making. If we could just bring back Mr. Nwachukwu back into the conversation, because for most people, with regards to the forex crisis, it is more a political dilemma than it is an operational issue for most people, because we saw what happened under the Emefiele regime. There was a lot of talk about corruption, a lot of round tripping, as you pointed out a little earlier. And Mr. Cardoso, in his screening, during his screening at the Nigerian Senate, talked about blocking excesses in the past. He also did talk about compliance with the laid down rules and regulations or laws in the CBN Act. He also did talk about zero tolerance to abuses and how they have recognized in the acting capacity for the couple of days that they were in charge before the screening exercise, the fact that there is a need to work closely with the National Assembly as far as oversight function is concerned. How do you see him overcoming, or the team overcoming, those pitfalls that eventually pretty much sank previous policies in the past?
So thank you so much. I think I will start by saying that Cardoso was quite intelligent enough. Smartly, he told the Nigerian Senate and the rest of Nigerians what I just said now. And please don't expect much from me. If you're talking about issues with supplies, issues with agri, or issues with, you have to go and make sure that you ramp up production. Who is going to ramp up production? Is it the CBN? That is not going to indulge in what Emefiele did by doing anchor borers, getting into farming, and that. It's not his policy, it's not within his purview to start producing agricultural products. It's the Ministry of Finance, fiscal policy maker. If it has to do with overbordering importation, that is not going to be him, like Emefiele did by banning, 42 or 43, 42 items that was shortlisted that they can't give forest to. So this is another way that it's going to go. That is totally fiscal policy makers that expectations are from, not from the CBN. But my concern, and the rest of us also, is what is his posture about the trajectory of MPR, moving the interest rate up. That is why most of us say you should think that a bit, because what is causing the inflation that you are trying to tackle is not the supply of money or money in circulation. It's more of supply push. It's more of structural issues that has to do with supply of these basic goods and services, amenities to the society. So if we can tackle it, the physical side can tackle the supply side, it will help to control inflation rate. It should not be looking at raising MPR to control inflation rate. And that I expect him not to actually increase. But based on what is available now, interest or inflation rate somewhere around 25%, he may think by, maybe going up by 25%, 25 basis points, or remaining at that 18.75%.
Right. If I may follow up with you, Doctor, he also talked about the need to stop the interventions that we have seen occasioned by the COVID-19 crisis or pandemic. And we know they intervened in various sectors to the tune of about 9 trillion, about 2 trillion or 1.6 trillion of that amount had returned. How are we going to achieve this sunset you know, such that we do not, in the bid to start divorcing from what you think is not a traditional central bank rule, stifle the economy in a way, because some of these people have taken these funds with 2 years, 3 years moratorium to run over 7 years and all of that. I hope that in this stoppage, we don't come up with something that completely hands off that process and throw the people who have benefited from these funds into another kind of quagmire, because some of them have put these funds in sectors that would take another 3-4 years to mature, from procurements to installations to productions and all of that. How do we systemically withdraw, you know, that we do not cause so much disruption to the economy?
Okay, thank you so much. I think, like I said, the young man actually intelligently and smartly answers most of this question. That is going to take a paradigm shift from what has been the way and manner the last administration believed that you can continue to dish out money to solve some of these issues that are policy related. It's good. I'm so happy that he's not going to take the steps that the last administration or the last CBN did, in the sense that there are critical agencies of government. We have Bank of Agriculture, we have Bank of Industry. If you have any intervention, channel such funds to such institutions. In fact, the primary functions of CBN is to galvanize or aggregate funds and channel it to those critical national areas that these funds are needed. If there are policies through the Ministry of National Budget and National Planning that the Nigerian government wants to build or encourage investors to build modular refineries, you compare banks to channel funds to it. That's the word CBN, not CBN itself dishing out money for investors that wants to build a modular refinery. If there are policies of government through the Ministry of Agriculture to grow grains, CBN, we have to put up policies to channel funds through the Ministry of Agriculture or our commercial banks to lend to farmers, to lend to industrial farmers. These are how things are worked, not CBN dishing out money to farmers under a Cardoso's program. So I'm happy that he has said that he's not going to continue to compensate, because most of this money being dished out by CBN are more like compensation to politicians.
Right. Okay.
So he has said, I'm not going to continue in that way, because we have little available to be dishing out, to be given to people who are not real. So the question is to trigger the institutions that are needed to be triggered to start functioning effectively. Like I talked about, the ministry, the Bank of Industry, the Bank of Agriculture. These are the critical institutions that these funds needs to be channeled to and get the same concerns that you raise. Those in existing loans or existing financial facility with them will be enrolled or be repackaged or migrated to such institutions. Okay. There should not be cause for alarm. CBN should focus on its mandates.
Okay, a lot of that mandate we've seen morphed into something a lot bigger, whether it's the Anko Boras program that Mr. Steve Nwachukwu is talking about, the CBN overindulging itself, extending itself too much. But it also has something to do with the climate, isn't it? We're coming off the back of a recession, and the economy was contracting, there was a lot of pressure, and you can understand the political pressure to actually focus on, you know, whatever resources that we have available to stimulate some of these sectors back to life. In terms of, you know, that we also have a situation that mirrors just something like that, isn't it? Where we're talking about food inflation, for instance, poverty level going up, and all of these things at this moment in time. Give me your take on what the administration vis-a-vis through the CBN can do to make sure that we don't overextend the CBN, because as much as Mr. Cardoso wants to talk about autonomy and them operating as a central bank, there are overlapping situations where, of course, he has to feed into the renewed hope agenda of the Tinubu administration. How do you square this dilemma where the CBN is trying to be a catalyst and not necessarily put its dog in the fight or become a dog in the fight, but also realizing that there are some political goals that need to be attained.
But that is why we have a political economy, which is an interplay of politics and the economy itself. And Mr. Cardoso is already there too, because if you look at Mr. Cardoso antecedent with President Bola Tinubu, you will see that there is a relationship already, and that relationship needs to galvanize for better government. But my fear is this: if you recall what happened between Emefiele and Buhari, you know that it's a danger thing again to happen. So you recall Ways and Means loans that amount to about 23 trillion. That, you know, even Nigeria never knew about it, and because of that, even Emefiele also endorsed in a lot of things. There was no reports for our accounting or proper auditing. No, you know, even reports. Also, there was no report for like 6 years and what have you, and it's because of his romance, possibly with
I think, to put it in proper perspective,
right,
the reports were there, but they never disclosed.
It's the same thing we are saying. Once you don't give the public, it's as though he's not there. Yeah. So and we got to know that after 6 years or what have you. So these are the things that we need, and that's why he was also talking about oversight function. And if National Assembly also are doing their part very, very well, we should have asked for such thing and bring it out. So for me, I think in as much as the president wants a Renew Hope to be at least to maximize the new hope, and Mr. Cardoso is like a catalyst, like you rightly said, they also need to be cautious of what really the Nigerians economically need. We are in dear need of a CBN that will focus very well on the micro issue and monetary policy issue that will, we don't say they shouldn't intervene, but what Mr. Nwachukwu was saying was that no, intervene through this agency so that they can actually manage this Ministry of Agriculture, BOI. They have the mandate to even go and even follow. Look at the anchor borrower now, the moratorium, and a lot of things are supposed to have been remitted back.
I mean, the recovery itself
is a problem. So now, who will follow the recovery? If you are giving it to this agency that are starting with this responsibility, so they will have a system to really manage it. So for me, Cardoso is very smart to say, no, don't call me into this. Let me focus on my job. If there's any need for intervention, we'll take it through this.
The proper channels.
Yes, another thing we need to look at is our trade policy. We need to work on our trade policy, because if we are talking from here to tomorrow, we need that trade policy to function. Functional trade policy. It will bring functional balance of payment, and it will help our relationship.
So, Mr. Elias, do you, in getting that trade policy to work, we've had for time immemorial conversations around outside the fiscal, monetary and trade policy, conversation around some kind of a melting point where everybody shakes hands.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily exist right now. And in all our conversation, most times we pander to just the fiscal or monetary players because they seem to be very big and lucrative positions in our country. Do we seem to understand the relevance of, say for the time of Aganga, we don't seem to have brought in people who fully realize and understand the place of trade as a catalyst for attracting FDIs or even exporting goods out of Nigeria. The average person doesn't even know what it takes to export a sesame seed or a cashew. As simple as those things are, as they are. And we have a trade minister, all we hear is it's MOUs upon MOUs like the ones we have in aviation, BASA agreement upon BASA agreements that we never vitalize. We just sign our own part, keep them, and the other countries take advantage of theirs, vitalize theirs, and take advantage of whatever they can get from us. Do you think we know, I mean, these trade ministers understand what role they have to play in all of this mix?
Well, it's saddening that that area is relegated to an extent. You see, if you look at our manufacturing sector, they are suffering because of that. Our Ministry of Commerce and Industry are not doing what they're supposed. They are supposed to come and really support these people. Then you discover that, let's look at the global economy. You discover that multinationals are the major catalysts that make things work for internet. If China can have free trade zone, two free trade zone in Nigeria, that simply means right from their country, they make sure there is ease of business for you to register your business. You going abroad today, make sure they create a soft land, you understand, for you to operate very, very. And these are what we need to. And look, just look at very small thing that is closer to them. ACFTA,
African Free Trade
area. What are we doing to it? You know, Nigeria remain a dumping ground for all these people, because if they find it easy in their country, you know, they are doing test run, and there are some states, some countries are there. If they find it easy, Nigeria will become a dumping
and like
ground.
the CBN governor said, importing inflation.
It's a problem.
Right.
It's a it was in Rwanda. I discovered that in Rwanda they are producing Volkswagen, and the population of Rwanda is 13 million. So who is going to use the car? They'll bring it down to Nigeria. Go to countries like South Africa. They said only 5 cars and you must produce here. You know, this is a trade policy. So if you now say Nigeria, when I counted number of cars we use in Nigeria in terms of brands, it's about 34. So 34 that are not even producing here, and the one inside,
or even assembling.
Assembly. So and we want the infant industry to grow. So these are the issue of trade policy. So you have to look at that area very well. Right. This is where we can get this foreign exchange as expected.
Right. If we can bring back Mr. Nwachukwu back into the conversation, just taking you know, a page out of the concerns raised by Senator Oshomole in that comment that we put out earlier about, listen, we can align ourselves with the global market, with global trends and things like that, but at the end of the day, we have to pay attention to what is happening domestically. How do you see him do that, especially when sometimes you get a sense that there is conflict between the interests of the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank and Nigerian interests, because more often than not, they're not always aligned?
Yes, you're right. This canvas or these very liberal policies are being, you know, promoted by most of these multinational organizations like the World Bank and the IMF. Perhaps, yes, it benefits the West more than it benefits the African nation or developing countries. So that's why, like I said, I totally align myself to the submissions and opinions and views of Adam Oshomole. But the question is more like he's making a media hype. He is a senator. He is the one making the laws. Now, I expect from him some couple of legislations and laws that will actually help our industrial sectors or help the local manufacturers to put to life what he just said. It's not all about, you know, advising the CBN. It's also putting policies around or legislations that will forbid us from signing most of these bilaterals that are not beneficiary to us. Now, coming back to what I said earlier when I talked about the issue of planning and implementation, and it can only come from the synergy between the fiscal and monetary policy makers. Like I said, I have less and little expectation from the monetary policy makers, that is the CBN and its team, because things have gotten worse. Things at the critical state that you don't need monetary policy decisions to solve. You need fiscal policy decision. Let me take, for instance, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu stood on his inaugural day, stood on that podium and took a physical decision. I am removing fuel subsidy. We all saw, we are living witness, we are partakers both in the suffering and the goodwills of the decision he took that day. That fuel subsidy has been removed and everything turns around. These are fiscal policy decisions. They are not monetary policy decisions. We are talking about prices of goods are going up. We can't even afford to buy the grains in the market. And we need decision around that we need to feed our nation. Food security. What are we doing? Farmers are still running away from their ancestral homes. It's fiscal policy decisions that we help. It's not monetary. We have to be sincere to ourselves. When I call on Adam Oshomole and the likes of them who are there, who can make these laws that will actually fast track the development that we needed. So it's not by saying, look away from the Libra, look away from the IMF and other multinational organizations. It's a question of putting out the right laws that will assist us. What are we doing around our manufacturing? How much have we set at in our national budget to support these very manufacturers? It is them, the National Assembly has to do it. What are we doing, say, in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we are putting up this 4 trillion to make sure that we are sufficiently growing grains. A loaf of bread is selling above 1,200, 1,500 because we don't have grains. What are we doing by using also the instruments of the commerce and industry to attract like the Ukrainians, the Ukrainians, the Russians who are experts in grains cultivation and production of grains? What are we doing to have some level of bilateral agreements with them so that we can grow these very grains here? What are we also doing with the 16 industries that are here? Ulam is here. Flour mill is here. What is government doing around them to make sure you compulsory or you put some laws that will perhaps say 40 to 50% of your raw material you will have to produce it here? We have arable lands. These are the things we are talking. It has to come with also law and policies of government.
All right.
We cannot continue to shout and claim that we love Nigeria while we are not doing the right things that will assist the government or assist the people live at least a fair standard of living.
That's right.
Policies of government affect Nigerians.
All right. I would like to chip in quickly, and I would like you to respond to what I had earlier asked our guest in the studio. He also mentioned a target of growing the Nigerian economy, I mean the GDP, to 1 trillion at the end of the 80s. And some of the things that can practically grow this GDP seem to be resting on the fiscal side. And so for me, I would like to understand from your point of view, if he's cutting back from most of the development intervention initiatives, and he's thinking expansionary economy, where do you find the balance? What exactly would give for this expansion to happen?
Okay, I think first and foremost, let's get this thing in perspective. CBN is an agency of government, more like an independent agency. It's part and parcel and integral of the government. CBN handles the monetary policy decisions. What is the monetary policy? To galvanize, to aggregate funds and channel it to where these funds are needed. The fiscal policy makers from the Ministry of Planning, Budget, Finance, Commerce, Petroleum, Transportations are the key agencies of government that will develop these very policies, including Ministry of Agriculture. If you have a synergy, a collaboration with these very key agencies, when they come up with the plans that, well, I want to grow what we eat, Ministry of Agriculture will come up with plans that we have so land, hectares of land mapped out, this and this. How do we channel funds? CBN will not direct commercial banks, put out 3, 5, 10 to 20% of your balance sheet to fund such projects. That is how development occurs. That is how to grow the GDP to the 1 trillion we are talking about. The work of CBN is to galvanize these funds and channel it to the critical areas where government is looking at. If the government says, I want to build and I want to increase the power sector to somewhere around 20,000 megawatts, the CBN will now have to call the banks and say, we have an aggressive demand from the government, from the fiscal side, that you have to fund. Once those very projects are viable, you have to fund these very projects in power generation. That is how government works.
Right. Okay.
There should be synergy. Like I said, CBN is an agency of government, though an independent agency, but they don't work in isolation with the government. That's why there is Fiscal Responsibility Act, which gives the CBN the leverage to also fund physical projects through ways and means. The only thing happens that the last administration totally abused that ways and means by excessively asking for money.
Okay.
What they ought to have done through the commercial banks,
I mean, for
to channel funds.
He says he has little expectations, but you know, from his take, the stakes are really, really high, isn't it? For the government, but more importantly for Nigerians who are paying through their teeth right now to put food on the table, or to pay school fees, or to just look after their families, isn't it? What are your thoughts about the expectations, and especially what we need to look out for as far as a paradigm shift is concerned in the short, medium, and long term of the new, team at the CBN?
Right, just like you had rightly mentioned about shorts, medium, like the shorts one, the low-hanging fruit we call it, is to just tame this free fall of naira. That's very, very critical. And how do we do that? Is just to ensure that this, like I said, he need to step on some toes. So you need to design a way that this dollar issue will reduce. And how do we reduce? We have floated it already. So how do we now make sure that it comes to balance? The onus is on him now to decipher, because recall that this floating of naira, Buhari government actually tried it before. You recall, they have to like put it down because it's counter productive, and you agree with me, it's already counter productive. So consequently now they need to either reverse or to an extent to manage this floating of naira, because globally there's no country that would leave that to I and E window. They have to like tame it, and that's the first thing that they need to do, because it's affecting a lot of things. You could see inflation, interest rates, even purchasing power is not there. So for me, these two variables, and that's why we always, when we are mentioning CBN, we should always be just talking about even the president himself. These two variables of naira floating and also removal of fuel subsidy, it's a big problem. The worst will come if come December we don't see refinery. That would be the major problem.
Unfortunately, CBN doesn't control all the variables.
All those variables. So that's why I agree with him that we are just saying CBN. CBN could always give
so let's all manage our expectations.
Right. Then in the medium term, and that's another thing, we need to have a policy direction. It's very key. The president himself was saying that they will bring it out. We need to have that policy direction. And in the long run, he's mentioning that he wants to increase the GDP. As at now, GDP, the manufacturing sector is not doing well. The agriculture sector is not doing well. It's the service sector that is doing well. So what do we do to reverse this, to make sure that the manufacturing sector contribute as expected?
All right. I wish we had time to continue to take some of those nuggets. And I want to believe that the quality of the people we have understand some of these things. One of the economics I spoke to, said something of note. He said the good thing is that between the CBN governor and Wale Edu, they know at least 70% of the players in these financial industries that can make things happen for this country. So
let's hope they can leverage
and make things happen. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Elias.
Thank you for
finding time to be here and providing us with those insightful perspectives. Dr. Nwachukwu, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Some of these days we may have to find a way to bring you straight into the studio and remove this digital divide between us. It's always a pleasure, and your perspectives are always welcome on Trust TV.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.